She offers herself to the feared vampire king to escape a mortal fate she never chose, trading a short doomed life for an eternity in his dark court. But the monster who should have owned her soul instead shields it, breaking ancient laws written in blood. Their forbidden bond shatters prophecy itself, forcing gods and monsters alike to face a destiny neither of them was meant to have. People like to say the vampire king had no heart, only ice and hunger inside his chest. They never met the girl who proved them wrong just by walking into his darkness on purpose. The night Amara ran from her village, the moon was only a thin silver scar in the sky. The air smelled of rain and chimney smoke, and every window she passed snapped shut as if the people inside were afraid that simply seeing her would bring misfortune. Her sandals slapped against the dirt road, her breath fogging in front of her as she clutched the small satchel that held her whole life, one book, her mother's scarf, and the royal decree that promised her death at sunrise. By law, Amara was not a criminal, she was something worse. The king's advisor had read the old prophecy in front of the whole square. A child born under a blood-red moon would bring ruin to the human throne. When the signs matched Amara's birth, fear spread faster than any plague. For years they watched her, whispered about her, blamed every bad harvest and broken bone on the girl with the quiet eyes. Finally, the human king decided the safest answer was the cruelest one. At 18, the decree said, the girl will be taken beyond the border at dawn and sacrificed to seal the prophecy. They called it justice. Amara knew it was just fear dressed in fine clothes. Her father had cried as he handed her the paper. Her little brother had tried to burn it, but the royal seal did not catch fire, only blackened at the edges and held firm. Amara was the one who steadied their shaking hands. She had always been the calm one, the one who listened more than she spoke, the one who knew that courage sometimes meant not shouting but choosing a different door. That night, while the guards drank in the tavern to celebrate the kingdom's safety, she chose hers. The different door was not really a door at all. It was the forest that no one entered, the tree line that began like a wall of shadows at the edge of the wheat fields. Beyond that line was the vampire king's territory, where human laws ended and old magic began. Mothers used his name to scare children into obedience. Merchants crossed themselves when the dark carriage passed far off on the northern road. They said his eyes glowed red like fresh coals and that he drank a soul with every glass of wine. They said stepping into his domain was a death sentence. Amara stepped anyway. Branches clawed at her dress as she pushed into the forest, the night pressing close around her like cold hands. Owls hooted somewhere above. The smell of damp earth rose with every step, mixed with the sharp scent of pine and something metallic like lightning before a storm. She stumbled once on a root and caught herself against a trunk slick with moss, and for the first time that night she allowed herself to tremble. She was not brave because she felt no fear. She was brave because she walked forward even while every part of her wanted to run back to the warmth of her brother's arms. Keep going, she whispered to herself, voice barely more than breath. If you die here, at least it's your choice. That was the quiet truth at the center of her reckless plan. If the human king was willing to kill her to save his throne, then his mercy meant nothing. The vampire king, for all his terror, had been keeping his own kind behind the border for centuries. There was a treaty signed before Amara's grandfather was born. He had never broken it. A monster who obeyed a promise might listen to a girl who came with empty hands and honest eyes, or he might tear out her throat and be done with it. But at least he would not pretend his cruelty was kindness. After what felt like hours of walking, the trees thinned and Amara's breath caught. The castle rose ahead, carved out of the mountain itself, its towers like dark fingers scratching at the sky. Thousands of small lights burned in the windows, warm gold against the stone, like a city of stars had fallen and gotten trapped inside. A river of black glass, no, she realized, an actual river, frozen solid, curved around the base of the cliff, reflecting the castle upside down. Everything was silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. She crossed the narrow bridge, her footsteps echoing on the stone. The great doors at the front were carved with scenes of battles and coronations, but the faces of the warriors had been softened with age, their sharp lines worn smooth by centuries of rain. Amara lifted the iron ring and knocked, each hollow thud traveling up her arms. For a long time nothing happened. Then smoothly, without any visible hand, the doors opened inward. Cold air rolled over her, scented with old books, candle wax, and something floral she could not name. The entrance hall was vast, lit by candles that floated in the air without being held by anything, their flames a gentle blue. Portraits lined the walls, tall, elegant figures with pale faces and dark clothes, their painted eyes seeming to follow her as she stepped inside. Her heart hammered in her ears. She had imagined this moment 100 times, but in her imagination she was always stronger, always colder. In reality, her hands shook. Do not stop now, she murmured, fingers tightening around her satchel. You made it through the dark, don't be afraid of the light. Wise advice, a voice said from above, calm and amused. Though some would argue my halls are more shadow than light, little trespasser. Amara's head snapped up. At the top of a wide staircase he stood. The Vampire King was not the snarling creature the tales had painted. Yes, his eyes glowed faintly red like embers hidden under ash, and his skin was so pale it almost shimmered. His hair fell in a straight silver curtain to his shoulders, framing cheekbones sharp enough to cut. But there was elegance in the way he held himself, robes of dark velvet embroidered with gold, hands resting lightly on the banister as if he could feel the grain of the wood through his gloves. And there was something else, something no story had ever mentioned. A tiredness, deep and quiet, like a man who had watched too many sunsets from too many lonely balconies. For a heartbeat, they simply stared at each other. She felt his attention like a weight and a warmth at the same time, as if he were reading not just her posture and her clothes, but the shape of her thoughts. "You are far from home," he said, beginning to descend the stairs with unhurried grace. "And very much alive. That makes you either foolish, brave, or both." Amara swallowed, forcing her voice not to break. "Your Majesty," she said, dipping into a clumsy bow, "I came here on purpose." He reached the bottom of the staircase and stopped a few paces away from her, close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, lines made by frowning, not by smiling. His gaze flicked to the rolled decree she held. Without touching her, he inhaled softly, as if he could smell the fear inked into the parchment. "Humans do not come here on purpose," he replied. "They come by mistake or by force or not at all. Why are you different?" This was the moment, the invisible edge she had been walking toward since the night began. Her throat felt dry as bone, but she lifted her chin and met his eyes. If she was going to die, she would do it speaking her own truth, not their lies. "My king wants me dead because a prophecy says I will destroy his throne," she said. "Your people keep their word even when humans do not, so I came to make you a bargain." One of his pale eyebrows arched. "A bargain," he repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Candlelight brushed his features, tracing the fine, almost delicate curve of his mouth. What could a hunted human girl possibly offer the king of night worth breaking centuries of quiet for? Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. "My life," she answered. "Freely given, I'll belong to you instead of them. I will be your servant, your whatever you wish. In return, you protect my village and my family from my king's fear." She drew in a breath, feeling her whole world balance on the next 5 words. "I choose you as my fate." The hall went utterly still. Even the floating candles seemed to pause their gentle flicker. For a long, stretched moment, the Vampire King did not move. Emotions she could not read crossed his face in shadows: surprise, annoyance, something that almost looked like sorrow. Then, very slowly, he stepped closer. She did not flinch, though every instinct screamed at her to run. He studied her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You choose me," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "After a lifetime of being chosen by others, you stand in my hall and dare to choose your own doom." He shook his head once, a quiet, disbelieving laugh escaping him, without joy but without cruelty. "Humans are endlessly strange." He lifted one hand and she stiffened, expecting cold fingers on her throat. Instead, he stopped inches from her cheek, palm facing her, as if feeling the heat of her skin without touching it. Something softened in his eyes, a tiny light flickering behind the red. "You understand," he said slowly, "that if I accept, there is no going back. You will live in my world, among my people, under my rules. To your kind, you will be worse than dead. You will be mine." Amara thought of her brother's laugh, her father's rough hands, the way the villagers had looked at her like she was a storm cloud about to break. She thought of the human king who talked of honor while signing a girl away to die. She thought of this strange, tired monarch in front of her, terrifying and yet somehow the only one who had asked her what she wanted. "I already belong to no one," she whispered. "At least with you I chose." His expression flickered again, and for one raw, unguarded instant she saw it, the hidden crack in the stone, the compassion buried so deep even he had forgotten it was there. His voice, when he spoke, was quieter than before. "You have no idea what you are asking of me," he said. Lightning tangled in the clouds outside, a silent flash through the high windows, painting his pale face in sudden silver. Amara drew a breath to answer, but before she could speak, a distant door slammed somewhere deeper in the castle. Fast footsteps echoed toward them, urgent and uneven, and a young vampire in dark livery burst into the hall, eyes wide with panic. "Your Majesty," he blurted, hardly noticing Amara. "The northern wards just shattered. The humans, they've crossed the border, armed." The Vampire King's gaze snapped from the messenger back to Amara, something fierce and dangerous waking in his eyes. The floating candles flared brighter, casting their shadows long across the floor. "Then it seems," he said softly, power curling under every word, "that your king has forced my hand before I could answer you." He turned toward the great doors, his cloak swirling like liquid night, then looked back over his shoulder at the girl who had just offered him her life. "Stay where you are, Amara," he commanded, voice suddenly not tired at all. "Whatever happens next changes everything." And as the doors boomed open again and the thunder outside finally found its voice, she realized with a cold, sharp certainty that the choice she had made in the quiet of the forest was about to rewrite the fate of two kingdoms, and that the Vampire King's answer to her bargain would now be forged in the storm to come. If this were just another story, the Vampire King would have welcomed war like an old friend and answered steel with shadows. But real stories, the ones that hurt and heal at the same time, almost never let their monsters stay only monsters. The doors of the great hall slammed open, and a breath of icy night swept through the castle, carrying the smell of wet stone and torch smoke. Amara flinched as the wind tugged at her hair and dress, and the Vampire King stepped forward into it as if greeting an equal. His eyes, still glowing faintly red, narrowed toward the distant darkness beyond the courtyard, where the broken wards crackled like torn lightning along the ridge. "Sound the inner bells," he said, his voice calm but edged with something older than anger. "Wake the council. No one attacks without my order, no one." The young vampire messenger bowed and vanished in a blur of motion. Somewhere deep in the castle, heavy bells began to toll, their slow, echoing notes rolling through the halls like a heartbeat. Figures appeared at the far balconies and stairways, vampires in dark coats and embroidered vests, maids in crisp uniforms, guards with silver-threaded armor, eyes shining in the dim light, all turning toward their king. Amara stood just behind him, gripping the decree until the parchment bit into her fingers. Part of her wanted to shrink back into the shadows, to vanish before anyone could blame her for the crackling sky. Another part refused. The border had been broken because of a prophecy about her, yes, but she had also walked here on her own feet. Choices had consequences, so did fear. The Vampire King glanced over his shoulder, reading the war on her face. "You may still return to the hall," he said quietly, pitching his words so only she could hear. "No one will think you a coward for letting those who chose this burden bear it." Amara shook her head before she could stop herself. "I chose this too," she answered, voice soft but steady. "If my king sent soldiers because of me, I should see what happens." A reputation built on centuries of terror should have made his expression unreadable. Instead, something like reluctant respect touched his features. With a swift, almost absent gesture, he unclasped his velvet cloak and draped it around her shoulders. The fabric was surprisingly warm, lined with something soft that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. "Then stay close," he murmured. "Courage is not the same as standing in the open." They moved together through the castle corridors, his stride long and fluid, hers quick to keep up. As they passed, servants and guards bowed low, some staring at Amara with open curiosity. She wondered what they saw, a trembling sacrifice wrapped in their king's cloak, or the spark of a story that had not decided yet whether it was tragedy or miracle. At the base of the outer tower, an older vampire woman waited, her hair braided with silver threads, her eyes sharp as polished stone. "They shattered the northern band and stepped through at once," she reported. 2 dozen riders bearing the human king's banner, some carry holy symbols." Her gaze flicked to Amara. "And she arrives on the same night. Interesting." "This is Lady Myrle," the king told Amara, "my oldest advisor and my most persistent curse." His tone was dry, but there was affection under it. Myrle only snorted. "Someone must remind you that you are not invincible, my lord." She studied Amara another moment, then inclined her head with surprising gentleness. "You have stirred a sleeping world, girl. I hope you know how to sing it back to rest." Amara opened her mouth, unsure what to answer, but the Vampire King was already moving toward the spiral stair. "To the north wall," he ordered. "Myrle, keep the young ones inside. No one rushes in hungry." "Hungry?" Amara repeated under her breath, a shiver slipping down her spine. He heard it. "They do not feed on unwilling guests," he said. "Not in my kingdom. Fear makes humans cruel. Hunger makes my kind reckless. My duty is to chain both." The climb up the tower turned her legs to fire. The cold deepened with each step until white mist curled from their breaths. At the top, they stepped through an archway onto the outer rampart, and the world opened around them. Below, the frozen river shone like black glass, reflecting broken stars and the trembling red veins of damaged wards. Beyond it, on the far bank, a line of human riders waited, their armor catching the torchlight in sharp flashes. The banner of the human king fluttered above them, a golden crown on a field of blue. Amara's stomach twisted at the sight. That symbol had floated above schoolrooms and festivals all her life. Now it looked like a threat. A thin shimmer in the air, almost invisible, marked where the old magic of the border had once stood whole. Now it flickered and coughed like a dying flame, lighting the faces of both armies in a strange, restless glow. "Your people look afraid," Amara whispered. It was true of both sides. The vampires behind her watched with still, careful eyes while some of the human soldiers shifted in their saddles, gripping their reins too tightly. Everyone is afraid at the edge of a story, the vampire king replied. The question is what they do with that fear. He stepped up onto the highest point of the wall, the night wind tugging at his hair and cloak. Without raising his voice, he spoke a single word in a language Amara did not know. Power rippled out from him, invisible but undeniable, and the broken shimmer of the border drew in around him like a curtain. On the far side, a man in bright armor nudged his horse forward. He was tall, his posture stiff with tension, and his dark hair was bound back with a band of gold. Amara's breath hitched. She knew that face. Prince Ryan, she said, too quietly for the humans to hear. Memories crashed over her in waves. The prince visiting their village years ago, smiling as he helped a child pick up spilled apples. The way he had looked at Amara back then, confused but kind, when the villagers shifted away from her. He had been the only member of the royal family who had not seemed to enjoy the whispers about the prophecy girl. Now his jaw was tight and his eyes were hard. The kindness was still there, buried deep, but fear had built walls around it. King Lucian of the Night Realm, Prince Ryan called, formal and strained. You know who I am, you know why I am here. The vampire king Lucian, Amara realized, stood straight and unflinching. I know that my wards were broken without cause, he answered, his tone smooth as still water. And that you ride onto my land with weapons drawn, under cover of darkness, like thieves instead of diplomats. It is not the introduction I would have chosen for you, Prince of Dawn. We do not come as thieves, Ryan shot back. We come to reclaim a prisoner you have taken, a girl marked by prophecy and bound by our law. Amara felt every eye on the wall turn to her. Her heart kicked against her ribs, but she stepped forward until she stood just behind Lucian's shoulder, where the humans could plainly see her face. I am not his prisoner, she called, voice shaking but loud enough to carry. I came here alone. Your decree ordered my death at sunrise. I refuse to die for your fear. Ryan's gaze jerked to her, and for a split second the mask cracked. She saw it, the guilt, the conflict, the memory of that earlier kindness. Then it was gone, replaced by stiff duty. The decree was written to protect our people, he said, but the words rang hollow. The prophecy is clear. Your life endangers the throne and the realm, you know this. What I know, Amara answered, throat tight, is that no one asked me if I wanted to be your enemy. The riders behind the prince shifted, murmurs rustling through the line. Some of them looked uncertain now, glancing at each other. Others tightened their grips on spears and blessed charms, clinging to the story they had been told. Lucian let the silence stretch a moment longer, letting every ear catch Amara's words. Then he spoke, his voice turning quiet and sharp. You cross my border, break my wards, and point weapons at my hall, he said. And you accuse me of taking a prisoner when the girl herself declares she fled your noose. You dishonor your own tongue, Prince Ryan. Ryan flushed, anger and shame tangling. This is not about honor, he snapped. It is about survival. The seers have seen the flames. If she lives under your protection, the war between our realms will burn hotter than the sun. You think I fear you, Vampire King? I fear what will happen to all of us if that prophecy comes true. For the first time, Lucian's gaze softened just a fraction. You think you are the only one who has heard prophecy? He asked. You are wrong. Amara blinked. She had not expected that. 1,000 years ago, Lucian continued, another seer spoke in this valley. She said that if my kind and yours ever forgot the cost of peace, the border would drink royal blood and rise anew, binding two hearts that should never have touched. His eyes slid to Amara, then back to Ryan. I did not realize until tonight what hearts she meant. A shiver crawled up Amara's spine. Bound hearts, royal blood. She did not understand, not fully, but every instinct told her that the words mattered. Prince Ryan shook his head. Old riddles will not save us, he said. We have our orders. By command of the human king, that girl must die before dawn, no matter where she hides. Several soldiers raised crossbows at that, the metal points glinting. A few aimed at Lucian, most aimed at Amara. The vampires on the wall hissed softly, an almost musical sound. Hands went to blades and hidden weapons. Lady Myrtle stepped closer to her king, eyes flashing. Say the word, she murmured. We will end this insult before it becomes a war. Every part of Lucian's expression went still. The night held its breath again. Amara could feel the choice coiling in the air between them, answer fear with blood or hold still and risk more. She swallowed hard and stepped sideways, just enough that every crossbow had a clear view of her. Wait, she called, not to the vampires but to the humans. Her legs wanted to fold, but she planted her feet anyway. If it is my life you want, then aim at only me. Do not make others die for a prophecy that has never heard my voice. Lucian turned on her so fast the air stirred. "Do not bargain with your life in front of loaded weapons," he hissed quietly. "You told me courage is not the same as standing in the open," she answered, meeting his gaze. "But running from this won't save anyone. If I hide behind you, they will keep coming, and one day someone braver than me will have to stand here instead." Something in his face cracked then, not with anger but with a kind of worn-out grief. He looked at her the way one tired soldier looks at another just before the trumpet's sound. "My king," Myril warned, "they mean to kill her and call it destiny if you let them." "I will not let them," he said. The words came out quiet, but they rang with a finality that made even the torches flicker. Lucian stepped forward until he stood between Amara and the crossbows, his back to her, his cloak spreading around them both like a shield of midnight. "Prince Ryan," he called, "you say you fear the future she may bring. Then let me show you the present I will make instead." He raised one hand, palm outward toward the torn shimmer of the border. Ancient power gathered around him, thickening the air until Amara's skin tingled. The broken light of the wards bent toward his fingers, swirling brighter, forming a circle of red and gold fire suspended between the armies. "By the old law of the valley," Lucian intoned, voice carrying with unnatural clarity, "I claim sanctuary for this human under my crown. Any arrow loosed at her, any blade raised against her will be counted as if raised against me. Any curse sent her way will bind instead to the soul that uttered it. This is my oath, spoken in the sight of both realms." The circle of light pulsed, then sank into the earth with a soft, ringing hum. A faint warmth washed over Amara like stepping into morning sunlight. On the far bank, several soldiers cursed under their breath. One dropped his crossbow, hands shaking. "You dare twist the old magic for a single girl," Ryan shouted, horrified. "I dare remind it that a single life matters," Lucian replied. "You want war, Prince? Then understand what it means. To harm her now is to declare war not on a rumor but on me. On everything I protect, choose carefully." The line of humans rippled with unease. Some lowered their weapons, whispering to each other. The priest at Ryan's side urged him on, eyes bright with fanatic fire. "You must not hesitate, Highness," he hissed. "The signs are clear." Ryan's gaze flicked between Lucian and Amara, torn. For a heartbeat there was a chance. Amara saw it, a thin, bright path where he lowered his arm, turned his horse, and rode back to the border with his men. Her whole body leaned toward that hope. Then somewhere in the back row, a nervous archer's grip slipped. The crossbow twanged. The bolt flew. Amara saw the flash of metal more than the bolt itself. Time narrowed. Instinct made her try to duck, but she barely moved before a shape blurred in front of her. "Lucian." He stepped directly into the arrow's path with inhuman speed. The impact hit him like a punch. The sound it made was small and terrible, a dull thud followed by a crackle of strange light. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. Then the blessed silver of the bolt reacted with the magic of the sanctuary oath. Red light exploded from the point of impact, not like blood but like a flare of raw power. It rushed down his arm and into the stones beneath his feet, racing along the ancient lines of the border. The earth itself seemed to gasp. Cracks of crimson energy shot across the valley, up the mountains, into the night sky, painting the clouds with wild, twisting veins. Vampires and humans alike staggered. A few fell to their knees, clutching at their chests as if a sudden weight pressed there. Amara reached out on instinct, grabbing Lucian's wounded arm. It was cold and trembling under her hands, the fabric of his sleeve smoldering where the bolt had struck and dissolved into ash. "Your Majesty," she whispered, "you're hurt." "I have been hurt worse," he said through clenched teeth. But beneath the roughness there was something like wonder in his eyes, as if even he had not expected what his oath would awaken. He looked down at where her hands held his arm, then up at the sky torn with new light. "It has started," he murmured. "The old prophecy, the border has drunk royal blood." "Royal," Amara echoed, confused. He managed a strained, bitter smile. "Did you think I wore a crown for decoration?" Below them, the human horses reared and cried out, spooked by the lash of energy in the air. Prince Ryan fought for control of his mount, staring up at the glowing fractures with dawning horror. "What have you done?" he shouted. Lucian's knees buckled. Amara tightened her grip, trying to hold him up. For a terrifying moment, the Vampire King's weight leaned completely into her, too heavy and too fragile at once. He caught himself on the wall with his free hand, breath ragged. "Listen to me," he said, voice rough but urgent. "From this moment my life is bound to the fate of this valley and to the choice I made. To you. If you die, the sanctuary shatters and the war it prevents will begin. If I fall, the border collapses and both our realms will bleed trying to rebuild it. We are tied to each other now, whether we wish it or not." Amara felt the words land somewhere deep inside her, heavy as iron and bright as lightning. She had wanted her choice to matter. She had not imagined it would matter this much. Behind them, Myral's voice cut through the chaos. My king, you must come inside. The magic is still settling. You cannot stand in the open while it finishes binding. Another murmur rose from the human line. Some soldiers looked ready to retreat. Others, fueled by fear and the priest's whispers, began to knock fresh arrows, aiming through the strange red light as if they could force destiny to bend by sheer stubbornness. Lucian swayed. His fingers curled around the stones of the wall, leaving faint scorch marks. He turned his head, meeting Amara's eyes fully, the crimson in his irises now threaded with gold from the awakened border magic. Whatever happens next, he said quietly, the weight of centuries in his tone, you must not run from it. Not for my sake, not for theirs, promise me, Amara. Her throat ached, but she nodded. I promise. He gave a faint, almost disbelieving laugh as if he could not decide whether her courage was foolish or holy. Then his grip on the wall slipped. He began to fall. Vampiric hands were already reaching for him, Myral shouting orders, the air thick with sparks and shouts and the distant creak of human bowstrings being drawn back yet again. Amara lunged forward without thinking, grabbing at his shoulders as the world tilted. The last thing she saw before the rampart blurred around her was Prince Ryan raising his hand, not in surrender, but in a new command, and the wavering line of soldiers steadying their aim, targeting the wounded king and the girl now bound to him by a promise no one fully understood. And caught between two armies, holding up a fading legend with all the strength of her mortal arms, Amara realized that the next heartbeat could decide not just her fate, but the future of every soul standing on both sides of the broken border. Stories like to pretend the hardest part is the battle on the wall. Most of the time, the real battle starts after everyone looks safe, and the silence finally has room to ask dangerous questions. The world did not slow down when Lucian's knees gave way. Arrows flew, magic screamed. Amara's body moved before her mind could think, arms locking around the vampire king's shoulders as he collapsed. The weight of him almost dragged her down, but she planted her feet and held on, cloak whipping around them both like a storm-torn flag. A second volley of bolts cut through the air, bright silver tips meant to pierce through legend and flesh alike. The sanctuary oath reacted before any hand could. Red gold light burst from the stones under Lucian's boots, rising in a curved wall around them. The arrows struck the glowing surface with sharp, ringing sounds, then scattered back across the frozen river, falling harmlessly at the hooves of the human horses. Several mounts reared. One soldier cried out as his own ricocheted bolt grazed his arm, leaving a burn of shimmering light instead of blood. Confusion rippled down the human line. On the wall, vampires stiffened, caught between answering with force and obeying their king's command to hold. Cease fire, Prince Ryan shouted at last, horror and shock battling in his voice. Fall back to the ridge, now. The riders pulled away from the shattered border, some casting frightened glances over their shoulders at the glowing barrier that had turned their weapons back upon them. Torches bobbed in the dark as they retreated, shrinking to a restless line of light on the distant hill. Only when the humans were safely beyond the old tree line did the red gold wall sink back into the ground with a final, weary flash. Inside, Lady Myral snapped. In less than a breath, 3 vampires were at Lucian's side, easing his weight from Amara's arms while still letting her keep one hand on him. The magic's still wild. If it lashes again, it will hit anyone standing too close. Amara's legs shook as they helped carry the vampire king down the tower steps. His head lolled against her shoulder, hair cool and heavy against her cheek. Up close, he did not look like a nightmare at all. He looked tired, too tired for someone who had just stood like a wall between her and death. Vampires and servants lined the corridors as they passed. Some stared at Amara with open suspicion, others with wary curiosity, but no one reached for her with claws or teeth. A pair of identical maids, faces pale, uniforms perfect, exchanged a quick look. That must be her, one whispered. The prophecy girl who made the sky crack, the other replied. And walked in wearing his cloak, the first added, eyes widening just a fraction. Even at the edge of panic, Amara felt a small, incredulous laugh rise inside her. Of all the things to notice, they chose the cloak. Fear and humor tangled in her chest, making it just a bit easier to breathe. They reached a set of double doors carved with curling vines and stars. Myral pushed them open, revealing a high-ceilinged chamber lit by floating lamps. Shelves of glass vials lined the walls, and the air smelled sharply of herbs, metal, and something sweet and strange, like rain on hot stone. Healing Hall, Myral said briskly, as if that explained everything. Put him there. They laid Lucian on a low, padded couch. His dark coat was scorched where the blessed bolt had struck, fabric crumbling at the touch of the healer's careful fingers. Underneath, his skin was unmarked, but the air around the spot shimmered faintly, as if heat and frost were wrestling just above his heart. An older vampire healer with ink-stained hands bent over him, frowning. "The wound is not in the flesh," he murmured. "The arrow struck the oath itself. The power is trying to finish binding and being resisted at the same time. He's holding it back." "Of course he is," Myril muttered. "Stubborn man." "What does that mean?" Amara asked, stepping closer despite the thick weight of magic pressing on her skin. Will he be all right?" The healer glanced at her, eyes searching. "You are Amara," he said softly, "the one he named." "I am the reason he's lying there," she shot back. "So answer me, please." "Not the reason," Myril corrected quietly. "The choice, there is a difference." The healer straightened. He made the sanctuary oath without time to prepare. That kind of magic reaches for anchors. It chose the strongest threads around him, the border, his own crown, and you. He hesitated. If he lets the magic settle, it will finish the bond between you. If he fights it, it will keep trying to complete and keep tearing him apart. "So he's hurting himself to stop it from binding to me," Amara said, the realization hitting like cold water. "Because he doesn't want me trapped. Because he has spent centuries losing people he swore to protect," Myril said, her voice softer now. "And he would rather bleed out slow than tie you to him without your consent." Amara's chest ached. Few in her world had ever cared what she wanted, only what she might someday become. Yet here lay a creature every child was taught to fear, refusing power to spare her a choice she had already made. "What happens if he keeps resisting?" she asked. "He fades," the healer said simply. "Not today, not in one breath, but like a candle strangled by its own smoke. His power will pour into the border to hold it steady. Your realms will be safe for a while, he will not." Silence hummed between the shelves. The twin maids at the door exchanged another glance, this one tight with worry. Somewhere deeper in the castle, bells tolled again, slower now, a sound of watchfulness rather than alarm. "And if he lets the bond settle," Amara pressed. "Then your lives will be linked until something stronger breaks the weave," the healer replied. "You will feel echoes of each other's pain. Your choices will tug on his fate and his on yours. The prophecy of bound hearts will no longer be words in an old book, it will be you." Myril's gaze found Amara's. "It should be his decision," the older vampire said, "but he will not choose for himself, so the magic waits for you." Her tone grew gentle, almost reluctant. "If you touch his hand and accept the bond, it will lock. If you refuse, it will search for another path and likely tear him apart trying." The world narrowed to the couch, the pale face upon it, the faint furrow at his brow even in unconsciousness. Lucian had stepped in front of an arrow meant for her. He had taken a risk that might start a war just to give her sanctuary, and even now, with power tearing at him, he was trying to keep her free. Amara's fear did not vanish, it sharpened, but under it grew something harder and brighter, the knowledge that courage without kindness was only pride. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was say yes to a burden you had never asked for, because walking away would hurt someone who had already done more for you than anyone else. "What do I need to do?" she asked. The healer moved quickly. He fetched a shallow silver bowl and filled it with clear water from a crystal decanter. When he set it beside Lucian's arm, the surface of the water rippled without being touched, responding to the restless power in the room. "Put his hand in the bowl," he instructed. "Then place your hand over his. If you truly accept, the magic will know. If you lie, it will break you both." No one tried to stop her. No one urged her on. That somehow made the choice feel cleaner. Amara slid the heavy cloak from her shoulders and knelt. Lucian's hand lay limp against the cushion, long fingers relaxed, a simple gold ring circling one pale finger. She hesitated only a heartbeat, then guided his hand into the cool water. Tiny sparks danced across the surface where his skin broke it. Her reflection wavered in the bowl, eyes too wide, lips pressed thin. She laid her own darker hand over his, their fingers not quite interlocking, palm against the back of his hand. The contrast struck her. Two different worlds touching in a quiet, ordinary shape. "I accept," she whispered, because it felt wrong not to say it aloud. "Not as your property, as your partner in this, whatever this is. I won't let you disappear for my sake." The water pulsed warm under her palms. The world tipped. The healing hall, the shelves, Myril's worried face, all dissolved in a rush of red-gold light. For a dizzy second there was nothing but color, soundless and vast. Then images snapped into focus around her like paintings hanging in midair. A battlefield under a burning crimson sky. Lucian, younger and sharper, standing ankle-deep in dust, sword in hand, cloak torn. A human general clasping his arm, laughing through blood on his brow. "If you break your word, vampire, I'll haunt you myself," the man said, and Lucian laughed back, weary and fond. Behind them, a burning flag fell and was stamped out. The first truce. Another scene, a stone hall, this same hall, centuries earlier, full of cowering human children, eyes huge and thin faces. Lucian kneeling to speak to a boy clutching a broken toy, his tone steady, almost gentle. "You are safe here. No one will touch you while I wear this crown," he promised. The boy reached out and very carefully touched one sharp fang with his fingertip, earned a surprised, soft smile in return. Yet another, Lucian alone on a balcony, watching dawn he would never walk in, a simple bracelet clutched in his hand. Myrtle approached him from behind. "You cannot keep taking them in," she warned. "It hurts you when they leave." Lucian's shoulders sagged. "It hurts them more if I don't," he replied. The memories rushed by, each one a thread of kindness woven through blood and fear. Each one a quiet choice, not to be less frightening, but to be more honorable than the stories said he was. Then the vision slowed. Amara found herself standing in a place that felt like no place at all, a field of dark water reflecting an endless sky. Lucian stood a few paces away, whole and uninjured, dressed as he had been on the wall. Here his eyes glowed not just red, but streaked with gold and shadows of blue, like stormlight trapped in glass. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice echoing softly as if spoken in a cathedral. "This is the inside of the oath, the knot I was trying not to tie." "I walked in," Amara replied, again. A corner of his mouth lifted, the faintest ghost of a smile. "You are consistent, at least." He stepped closer, the surface of the dark water never rippling under his boots. "You do not understand what you're accepting," he continued. "Being bound to me means feeling the press of centuries you never lived, sharing the weight of choices that cannot be unmade. There will be days when my memories drag at you like chains." "Then we share the weight," she said simply. "You've carried it alone long enough." He looked at her as if no one had ever said that to him before. Maybe no one had. "Why?" The word slipped out, more fragile than he seemed to intend. "You owe me nothing. Your own people have taught you to fear me. Mine will not thank you for this bond. They will say I have grown weak, letting a human girl into my blood and my law." "Maybe," Amara answered, "but I'm tired of letting fear write everything. You gave me a real choice when no one else did. Now I'm giving one back." A faint laugh escaped him, sounded almost like it hurt. "You have a terrible sense of self-preservation." "So do you," she shot back. "We match." For a suspended moment, the not water under their feet held utterly still, reflecting them both, the pale king and the village girl, standing too close for the world as it had been. Finally, Lucian lifted his hand. "If we do this, there is no graceful half-measure," he warned. "Your life will not belong to me, but our fates will be entangled. When you are hurt, I will feel it. When I fall, you will feel the ground give way under you. There will be no easy way to run from each other." "Then we don't run," Amara said. Slowly, as if fighting himself, he reached out. Their hands met, this time palm to palm. Warmth flared where their skin touched, not searing but deep, like heated metal sinking into cold water. The world shuddered. Somewhere very far away, she heard the healer gasp, heard glass rattle on shelves. Here, in the heart of the oath, light lanced up their joined arms, tracing patterns across their skin, spirals and lines that settled over their wrists like matching, glowing bracelets before fading to a faint shimmer. Lucian inhaled sharply. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them again, and for the first time since she had met him, they were not only tired or dangerous. They were relieved. "It is done," he murmured. "You are absurdly brave, Amara." "Or absurdly foolish," she replied. "We'll see." The night sky above them cracked with bright light. The field of dark water shattered like glass. The oath space dissolved, and the healing hall rushed back around them. Amara found herself kneeling in the same place, Lucian's hand still in the bowl under hers. Every muscle in her body ached. Her head throbbed with echoes of memories that were not hers, children's laughter in stone halls, the smell of old steel, the weight of a crown put on and never taken off. Yet underneath the fatigue was a strange, steady feeling, like a new rope tied firmly to something solid. Lucian gasped and sat up, water cascading from his arm. The scorch mark on his sleeve was gone. The air around him felt different now, quieter, as if the wild magic had finally found a home. "You're awake," Amara said, ridiculous relief making her voice too bright. "So are you," he managed, studying her face as if checking for cracks. "Any dizziness, voices promising doom, sudden urges to drink blood?" She snorted, an unexpected laugh bursting free. "Just a headache, and you're not my first headache, Your Majesty." Myrtle let out a breath she had clearly been holding. The healer pressed fingers to Lucian's wrist, then Amara's, muttering about synchronized pulse threads and stable resonance. The twin maids at the door exchanged a look that said they were going to be discussing this in the laundry for weeks. Before anyone could say more, a new sound cut through the chamber. 3 sharp, echoing chimes from deep within the castle. Not the slow watch bells this time, a different pattern entirely. Myrle's face drained of color. "Inner wards," she whispered. "That's the alarm for a breach inside the walls." Lucian swung his legs off the couch, ignoring the healer's protest. "Impossible. The outer barriers are linked to the inner." "Unless someone slipped through while the boarder was distracted," Amara finished, her stomach tightening, while every eye was on the wall. A young guard burst through the doors, breathing hard. "My lord," he said, bowing so fast he almost fell, "we found human footprints in the East Servants' Passage. Fresh, armed, they're heading toward the guest wing." "The guest wing," Amara repeated, heat draining from her face. "Where the human girl would have been kept," Myrle said grimly, "if she had not followed you to the tower." Lucian's gaze locked with Amara's, the new bond between them humming like a drawn bowstring. "They mean to take you," he said, "or kill you where you sleep and blame us for the corpse." He stood, still a little unsteady, and held out a hand to her, not the commanding gesture of a king, but the offered grip of someone about to run into danger and hoping you would run with them. "Come, Amara," he said quietly. "It seems our enemies have kindly brought the war into my home." As her fingers closed around his, the inner bells rang again, louder this time, and somewhere in the depths of the castle, a door slammed open with the heavy finality of fate changing its mind.